This is a live stream implementation stream. I guess I'll get going. So firstly, who am I? Where's my, here we are. So I run Open Box Technology. We do technology solutions for churches. In particular, we do a lot of AV installations in Sydney, plus some other consulting. There's some contact details there. So this session, it'll be an overall framework with a little bit of technology thrown in there. Essentially a whole bunch of things that I have learned in providing solutions for churches. I should turn my video on. How do I do that? There we go. That's better. Yeah, hopefully it won't be too technical, but if we want to go down that direction in questions, we can do that. So the plan is not for me to tell you what to do, but more to focus on how and what to think about the tech. And I realize different churches may come up with a different conclusion on that and therefore go with different systems. My experience is that there's not a one-size-fits-all solution. I think it's helpful to say I don't have all the answers, but I think we can get us in the right direction. I can't necessarily tell you what is best, because that will really depend on what you're trying to achieve. Some of you may already know a bunch of what I'm going to go through, but hopefully there's still something that you can pick up or an option you may not have thought of. So, and a bit of an outline of the day or of the session is here. So we'll go through vision, live stream experience versus volunteer burden, a couple of case studies, and then I'll go through some equipment that's required and some considerations and thoughts there. I'll try and put questions in as we go as well, and there's some time at the end for questions, hopefully, if we have time. We've also got James Kersop here, who's from City on a Hill. One of the case studies is from City on a Hill, but James will need to go very soon. So might just grab him now before we get going, and get some just thoughts on your setup, James.
Yeah, do you want to jump to the case study slide and I can talk to that?
Yeah, I'll try and do that.
Sorry.
All right.
So yeah, I work at City on Hill. You probably heard about us in the news recently. So I've been in my role here at City on Hill for just over 5 months, and so even pre-pandemic, City on Hill was streaming and doing a pretty decent job. And through obviously the pandemic, did that as well. As we've returned to kind of church normal life here in Melbourne, we've kind of continued what we've learnt through COVID. So a lot of what our volunteers have been doing, and kind of amped it up, I guess, in some way. So we are trying to do a high quality experience, and we do that primarily for the people who are members of our congregation, but we know that there's a large number of people who are watching from outside Melbourne. We get regular emails from people in New South Wales, rural Victoria, and overseas sometimes as well. But one thing we have recently started doing is not leaving our whole Sunday morning services online for more than 24 hours, and we just cut those down to the sermon, the teaching component of that. So if you go to our YouTube channel, you'll see lots of sermons, but not a whole service as such. So that's how we kind of do the catering for those in our flock, but also giving an experience for people who are interested in Christianity and interested to hear about what we believe as a church to engage with the gospel. Where, as Nick has on the slide, we've got 3 cameras, 2 camera operators, and a director, plus people doing audio and song lyrics. So they're kind of a shared role. So audio does our broadcast mix and our in-room mix, and song lyrics are all fed from one computer to both stream and in the room. And we use some particular hardware that allows us to do that. And if people have got questions, feel free to reach out to Nick. I'm sure he can point you in that direction. And as Nick will talk about at the moment, volunteer burden is quite high, but we have some aspirations to make our stream even better than what it is now, and that's going to require us to get more volunteers. And so we're working through the recruitment process for now and praying that God will provide the people to do that, but also investing in new hardware to make that a reality. one thing that we've realized, and I've realized in my time here, is that there's lots of big ideas, but often those ideas take a lot of work in both equipment and personnel to do that. So we're investing a lot in our training. I think about 25% of our production budget is in training material this year. So we're really investing in our volunteers this particular year to make that a reality. And as you can see, we've got a little Blackmagic TV studio for switching, and we use the Resi service to stream to YouTube, YouTube, Facebook, and our website as well at the same time. So that the 3 platforms we stream to. And I think that's probably kind of covers the case study, Nick, unless people have got particular questions about what we're doing at City on a Hill.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, James. And I'll jump back to where we were, and I think we'll have to say goodbye.
See ya.
Right. Thanks, James. So the first section that we'll go through is vision. So here might be some obvious observations, particularly with what we've discussed this morning in the first session. But I think it's always useful to start with the vision. Now, I'm not going to tell you what your vision should be, but I do have some thoughts on the importance of the vision, the importance of having a vision, how you should approach setting the vision, and some other sort of considerations. So the first thought I have is to let your vision dictate the implementation and not the other way around. There's not really much point starting with what you could do, as you could do a lot of things. But your vision for what you should be doing will have a mix of theological considerations, like we were discussing this morning, as well as realities for your church. So what demographics you have, what your church situation is, geography, all that kind of thing. So working out what you want to achieve is the first step, and then working out how to do it is the second step. The next section, or next thought I have is technology is the tool and not the goal. It's super helpful to have the goal in sharp focus. Particularly, this helps us not get lost in technical details. You don't get lost in what camera specs you should be using, but you have a goal that you're aiming for, and that can help you make the other decisions. Next thought is who is the stream for? Again, I think there's a bunch of discussions this morning on that, but thinking about who the stream is for, who's going to be watching it, who do you want to be watching it, which watches do you care about? Not that you don't care about all of them, but there might be a particular group of people that you do care about. How can you make it easy for them? So what platform you choose might inform that. What experience do you want them to have? I'll go in a bit more detail in a second about that. But what's the experience you want people to have on the live stream? And maybe it'll be a different experience for different people as well. How do you engage and interact with those people that are watching? So all of that goes into the vision that you have. Next thought I have is to get your volunteers on board with the vision. Make sure that they know what's going on and why you're doing things. And bring them along with the thoughts that you have, with the discussions that you've had to decide on a particular vision. This will help them have the energy to do the job. It'll give them a desire to do a good job. They'll actually be more likely to turn up on time, to feed into what you're doing. They'll also understand the decisions you make and not fight you. I've definitely experienced that with a number of churches where the volunteers don't really understand what the vision of the leadership team is for a particular tech, and so when the church decides to buy a piece of equipment or do something in a particular way, the volunteers are sort of fighting them on it, and so have disagreements, and that makes it pretty hard to sort of run the team. And I think a lot of that is actually down to not having the vision or understanding what the church is trying to do. So it's really important to bring the volunteers along with you, get them on board with the vision. And the other reason for that is the volunteers may well have a better idea than you. If they understand what you're trying to achieve, it's quite possible that they'll have a way of doing that that is better than what you thought of, or better than what I thought of. So bring them along with you is super helpful. And then the last thought I have is if the realities don't really line up with the vision, then change the vision. It's not really a good idea to shoehorn the wrong implementation into the vision that you have. I know a church that they really want a good live stream. They've bought a lot of equipment to make it really good, but they just don't have enough volunteers. The volunteers they do have aren't super skilled, and so they can't deliver on the vision that they have for the live stream. It's very frustrating for them. It's also frustrating for me. I'm trying to help them deliver what they want, but they just don't have the realities of their church. Means that they can't do that. They want a magic box from me that makes everything great, but it just doesn't exist. So I think it's important to realize what's going on in that kind of situation, and then change the vision that you have for the live stream. Just to match up more with the realities of your church. Any questions on that before I move on to the next bit? Feel free to jump in. No? Great. Well, I'll move on to the next section. So live stream versus live stream experience versus volunteer burden. So what I mean by that is so the live stream experience is what people experience when they're watching the live stream, and the volunteer burden is sort of what it takes to happen. And we'll need to find a balance between these two. It'll be likely very different for each church. We'll dictate cameras and all that kind of stuff. We'll go back to, there. I think that's it. So a bit more on all of this. If you only have like the ability to have one volunteer and they don't have a lot of experience, you will have to reduce your expectations for the experience people will have of the live stream. However, if you have lots of relatively experienced people and or the ability to train them along with a decent budget, you can really push the limits of the experience you can deliver. And now this may be somewhat obvious, but I don't think a lot of churches actually make a connection between the experience people have of the live stream and the resources they have available. It seems to be an idea that a live stream is a live stream. If you have a live stream, sort of tick, job done. But actually thinking about and setting expectations for the experience people will have of the live stream is really helpful. And it may feed back into the vision you have for the live stream. The experience people have is not just the fact that the live stream exists, but it's actually how they engage with it, whether they feel welcomed or not in the live stream. So thinking about all of those things is going to be very important. So thinking about how you interact and engage with viewers. So will you allow comments and a Q&A online? So that'll feed into the platform decision that you have. Will those comments and Q&As be monitored, both for bad actors, but also responding to people? So if it's YouTube and it's public and someone just comes in and starts spamming, is that going to be monitored? How do you deal with that kind of situation? But the other sort of thing that feeds into service, and this is a bit beyond tech as well, is the service elements. How will you actually mention the live stream audience from the front? At Barney's, which is my church, the service leaders actually acknowledge that there's a live stream audience and says hi to them. So will the service leaders and preachers actually look into the camera and be looking at the live stream audience, or are they sort of not looking at cameras? How are you going to help people feel included if they are watching in the stream? In the last session, someone mentioned audience mics, ambient mics. That's one way that you can use to actually include people in the live stream. People can hear people singing. if it's there in the sermon, depending on the acoustics of your church. You can hear people interacting or laughing at jokes or whatever it might be. Those kind of little considerations will actually help you set a particular experience of the live stream. So let's look at some case studies. So we've already had one from City on a Hill, but the other one is my church, St Barnabas Broadway. We do want to encourage people to meet in person, but we do have a live stream for those that can't make it. We have decided, not necessarily my decision, and we're going to revisit this, but we have decided to have the song lyrics overlaid full screen. It doesn't look great. I very much prefer to have a lower thirds thing, I think, yeah, in terms of a look. But the intention for that is actually to have a worse experience on the stream, to encourage people who can't make or who aren't going to church because they're a little bit lazy. We want them to attend. That's a bit of a problem in our context. But again, we may revisit that soon. We also only stream without the ability to watch at a later date or a later time. So you have to be there on time and on the right time there. We also do a post-fader audio mix, which we can talk about later if you want. There's some equipment that we use there as well. So that's a bit of a case study there. I'll move on next to the equipment that that you're going to need to think about for a live stream. But before I move on to that, are there any questions? No? Great. Okay, so equipment. So racing through the equipment that you're going to need. First one is obviously cameras. I'll go through these in detail in a second. As switching equipment, encoding, the platform that you choose to stream to. Other considerations include where's your audio feed coming from. Most churches will already have an audio console that you can get a feed from, but thinking about, is that a post-fade or pre-fade mix? Is that the same as the main mix, or is it a separate feed? If you've got the resources and volunteers, you can have a separate live stream mix on a completely separate console. So thinking about that. How are you doing song lyrics and graphics, as well as the local projection, local video thoughts? That will all sort of play into the equipment that you have and how you sort of put that all together as a system. So cameras, obviously quite an important thing. Typically try for at least 2 cameras in a stream is my tip. One can be a static kind of view, and another could be a PTZ, or could be an operated camera. And there's a bunch of different options for cameras, which I've got listed here. So going through those, Bird Dog PTZ cameras, there's other PTZ cameras available, but I typically go with the Bird Dog ones. They seem to be the right price point, and they work really well for a lot of the installs that we've done. But again, there's lots of other options. PTZ cameras are really great because you can put them in a particular spot in your church that you may not be able to get an operated camera. They can be mounted on a wall or on a roof somewhere. You can also control them from a centralized location, so you don't actually have to be at the camera. You can have multiple cameras that are controlled by one person. So that'll help you have a larger live stream or camera shot, but have a smaller volunteer burden. So that's often a good option for some churches. The Marshall box camera is similar kind of deal, relatively cheap, and often can be fixed. There's other sort of cameras that are available that can do this as well. But yeah, you can put them in one spot, have a nice safety shot, something available that's maybe the whole stage or a portion of the stage, and it's just fixed and static, and you don't need to think about it. And then the last option there is the Canon, Panasonic, Blackmagic sort of cameras that will require you to operate as well. We've got 5 minutes left, so I'll race through this. The one important thing to think about with cameras, though, is you don't want it to feel like a security system. You don't want the cameras from above. You want to get the cameras in the eye line as much as possible. That's a super important thing to help people feel included, feel like they're part of the service, feel like they're sitting in the service, rather than feeling like they're observing like you would on a security system. Racing through this is switches. So this is how you control the cameras and the song lyrics and do all the overlays. I will always prefer a hardware switcher. It's a controlled environment. You don't have issues with versions or software updates or anything like that you might have on a computer. But you can do a lot of this stuff in something like vMix or Wirecast. Yeah, so picking the switcher will really help, depending on your requirements. So if you have lots of cameras, you'll need a much larger switcher. You also need to think about how you're doing the song lyrics implementation, and the switcher will to allow you to do different things, like have a key and fill input into your system to do overlay, or using chroma or luma kind of transparency. The larger Blackmagic constellation will also allow you to do a super source, so you can have multiple cameras visible at the same time, or a camera and your song lyrics full screen side by side. You can do that kind of stuff with super source as well. So you also need to think about how you're going to do the local video. Does your switcher need an auxiliary output to send to your local projector, or maybe a stage display? And then the last thing, or the second last thing, is encoders. How are you sort of managing the actual stream? How are you getting the video to the internet? You can use the Atom Mini Pro, for instance, which is a Blackmagic thing. That's also a switcher, or you could do a Magewell Ultra Stream. They're both hardware encoders, and again, I would much prefer a hardware encoder. It's a controlled environment and it does what it says on the box. But you can also then use vMix or Wirecast or OBS on your computer. Then platform. So you can pick Zoom or Teams, Facebook, YouTube, Vimeo, or you could do like a restream, which streams to a server and then out to multiple locations from there. Resi.io is a platform City on a Hill use, and seems to be a great little platform as well, that allows you to do a similar kind of thing, as well as manage content. It will do all the recording and that kind of thing for you. And it can also allow you to embed a video on your website, which is a more controlled environment. So picking which platform you're going to use will also have an impact from the vision that you have, whether you want to have comments, whether you want it to be public or private or unlisted. Also, having a consideration about the environment that people are watching it in. So YouTube, Facebook, it's not as controlled an environment. You might have ads, or you might have at the end of the stream, might have recommended videos popping up that you don't have control over. So thinking about a lot of those kind of things will inform your choice of platform. But again, that'll be informed by the vision that you have for the stream. I think we've got a couple of minutes if anyone has questions or comments or any thoughts.
I had a question which was to do with trying to go from reality to a step better than where we are at the moment.
Yeah.
And our situation is that we're running OBS. We've got a couple of computers to get everything going, and a few cameras. But our issue is our volunteer base is untrained, and we've got a history of a lack of capacity within our leadership. So the leadership over the tech ministry has just been absent or very busy, so hasn't actually built up training. So trying to kind of bring people on board with a vision that hasn't been set is kind of where we're up to at this stage.
Yeah. It's hard if as you say, if you don't have that many volunteers and you're trying to sort of do a vision that's quite advanced, it's hard to sort of match that up. So it might be a good idea to sort of try and to collapse the vision down a little bit smaller, and build up some energy, build up some engagement, build up the tech team, give them a few skills, and then just grow from there, and make it bigger. But I think it'll also help to make sure that the tech team's fully on board with what you're trying to do. Give them an idea of what might be possible if they get more people on board, if they get more training, that kind of thing. I don't know if that's helpful. I'm sure a lot of that you knew already. I've got a question here. Thoughts on ProPresenter? I mean, it's pretty complicated, but it's a good platform for a lot of what you're trying to do. As a church, need to, I think, biggest issue I've seen is trying to manage the versions. Some versions are stable, some versions aren't. So making sure that you're sort of looking online before you upgrade to the next version, see if it's stable or not. That's probably what I'd say, unless you've got any particular questions, Graham.
No, nothing in particular. Nick, was just curious because you hadn't mentioned it. I was just wondering whether it was not the flavour of the month.
Yeah, no, it is quite useful, particularly if you're trying to do different content for a live stream as well as in church. So you can do like full screen song lyrics, but then have a separate output that has your lower thirds graphics over as a completely separate output. So it's really useful for that kind of thing.
It just seems very complex to use, that's all.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Cool. Suggestions for training videos and volunteers? That's a good question. ProPresenter, if you're using ProPresenter, there is quite a number of videos on that, so it might be good for a bit of a trawl on that. And similar for like Blackmagic kind of switches and that kind of thing. But I think most of what you try to do is actually going to be dependent on your situation. So maybe it's do a video yourself or a check sheet, work through all the different things. So if you have one key volunteer who can go through and implement all of that, and then they write out a list, that's probably a good way to do it. I often find doing a buddy system with volunteering is really good. So if you have one tech guy, and then you have so the observer who comes along for the ride, and then then you switch roles and you have two people there still. So the person who was observing is now doing, but they've got the support of another person. And then only once they're both competent and confident in that role is when they are then by themselves. So it means that training is a bit more involved than just a real quick, here's how the system works, okay, you're doing it on Sunday. But yeah, it's more involved than that. But I find that actually works really well in bringing people up to speed, having confidence in them, and also giving them confidence. There's not much value, I think, to having someone who is competent but not confident. In the same way that it's hard if someone's competent but not confident but not competent. So you need to have sort of both of those things happening at the same time for them to be reliable. Yeah, so I think enabling that to happen is really helpful.